cable straight leg RDL. For this variation of the RDL, you're gonna set up a box, a step, or a stack of plates in the middle of your cable machine, pretty much in line with each of the handles. I want you to grab the cables in each hand and step up, making sure that your feet are just about shoulder width apart and your toes are pointing forward. You want to keep your legs relatively straight throughout this motion as you're coming up and down, but don't lock them out, so a very slight bend in your knees. As you come down, I want you to really think about pushing your hips and your butt back rather than just bending or leaning forward. So think of it like you're closing the car door with your butt when your hands are full. That's a really good analogy I like to continue to keep in my head whenever I do this movement. It really helps me remember to push my butt back, not just bend forward. And then once you can't push your butt back anymore, that's gonna be your end range. I don't want you coming down any further than that because that's gonna shift the tension from your glutes and your hamstrings to your lower back, which is not what we want for this particular exercise. Once you hit your end range, make sure that you're firing your glutes and driving your hips forward on the way up. Don't forget to brace your core and keep your chin relatively tucked. This is really going to help you to keep your spine as neutral as possible. And that just means that we really want to have that kind of flat back, right? So instead of rounding our back or hyperextending our back, we want it to try to stay as flat as possible throughout the entire motion. Also, don't look up at any time during the movement. I want you to pick like a focal point on the floor, a few feet in front of you, and keep your eyes on that the entire time. Again, this is gonna help us to keep our spine neutral and our back as flat as possible, which is really important to make sure that we don't get injured during this movement and to also make sure that we're getting the most out of our glutes and our hamstrings with the entire range of motion. Another tip I like to think about when I'm performing any type of RDL, think about this as more of a horizontal movement of your hips, right? Coming horizontally back versus a vertical movement of your torso coming up and down. The straight leg variation of the RDL is going to bias more of the hamstrings over the glutes. And this is because when we keep our legs a little bit more straight when we're performing an RDL, that is going to put more tension on our hamstrings and a little bit less on our glutes versus if our knees were bent a bit more. So I want you to remember to keep your legs straight with only a slight bend in your knees just to make sure that we're not completely locked out. If you haven't tried a cable variation of an RDL, I highly recommend testing it out. It's a great variation to add into your training.